All right, hello everyone, and thank you for tuning in once again to the Black Box Podcast, BBOR, Black Box Online Radio, coming to you from West Virginia. Well, today we have a bit of a different case going on. We're going to be discussing the disappearance of Garnell Moore from around 2005. But I say that, but we don't exactly know the exact year even that Garnell Moore disappeared. This is something that I used to kind of, I guess I would say that I wanted to get more involved with this case a couple years ago. On this channel, I've mentioned that I used to follow the Maura Murray case rather, closely. I followed the Missing Maura Murray podcast, programs about it. I believe 2020 not Dateline, but Vanished, a show called Vanished about Maura Murray, and I was really involved with a particular case, the disappearance of Maura Murray from 2004 in Haverhill, New Hampshire. And then I was on a countdown site, and I learned of the disappearance of Garnell Moore, about a young boy from Baltimore, Maryland. And I was like, it really stood out to me. Both of the cases kind of dealt with people who were quote unquote vanished off of the face of the earth. And it's like, I guess that was one of the connections why I wanted to learn more about Garnell Moore and look for some things online, look for some sources. And this was several years ago, and I could barely find anything. YouTube really did not have much about people discussing Garnell Moore, and there was really just an article from the Baltimore Sun written in 2007 that really had, deep dive, kind of thorough investigation put into the case. But a lot has changed since then. There are now numerous sources out there. If you do a YouTube search on the disappearance of Garnell Moore, you'll find a lot of people covering the case. That's good news. If you go into Google, you'll find a lot of written sources. The Charlie Project has covered Garnell Moore a lot, and I think that that's very good that people are now covering this case more closely. What I think about this one is that we're kind of dealing with someone who was born in 1995. Garnell Moore was born at that time and living in Baltimore, Maryland. His mother was incarcerated for some drug related charges around that time. And then his father was never really part of his life that much. He was living a transient lifestyle, which I guess they describe as an urban nomad, like not having a real address or a phone number, just bouncing from people's homes from time to time, and also caught up in his own illegal activities. And is the way they described this in that article that I mentioned from the Baltimore Sun is that he was never really involved with his kids' life, but he did visit them periodically. And Garnell kind of stayed in a few places, but then he ended up staying with his aunt named Belinda Cash. Garnell also has another aunt named Trina Horton who will become very influential in this, so we gotta kind of keep some of the family members kind of in order. But one of his aunts was named Belinda, and her last name was Cash. She ended up caring him for a while. And on this channel, we mostly don't give too much backstory sometimes because it's mostly geared toward people who are familiar with the cases, so we can discuss the theories. But the fact of the matter is, with Garnell Moore, the backstory is just everything. We have a boy who was never enrolled in school, whose family members were not really part of his life. His mother was incarcerated; she wasn't able to be, but also because she had these drug-related charges, which kind of brought the situation to where it was. And his father just wasn't involved, so he was being cared for a while by his aunt Belinda Cash, and then she was not enrolling him in school. People had seen him at a few family functions, but they described him as a hyperactive boy. He carried around a toy car. Um, I believe one of the last times somebody saw him, he was playing in the yard. Sounds kind of normal, except for the fact that he wasn't enrolled in school up to the age of, like, what, 5, 6, 7 years old, and still, not being enrolled. But it's a big thing we need to notice because of such little activity that is documented around Garnell, it's very difficult to know the exact time that he disappeared. And that aunt that we mentioned, Belinda Cash, just said that she could no longer care for him, so she drove him to the social services building in Baltimore on 500 North, and she left him on the steps of the building, and then that was the last time she ever saw him. But the fact of the matter is that the address that she provided, this 500 North Hilton Street, was they say it's fictitious in the article from the Sun, but we could talk about some things associated with that. It was incorrect. There's nothing there, no social services building there. It's just I think when they say it's a fictitious address, they mean that there was nothing in the area that she described that had that particular number 500. Anyway, that was incorrect. So then they didn't know where Garnell was, and some of the relatives, I believe it was Trina Horton, the other aunt, asked to see Garnell once, and that Belinda Cash gave the excuse, Garnell isn't with us now. He is on a trip to King's Dominion with his school. But we've already talked about this, that Garnell Moore was never enrolled in school, so that seems just kind of like a blatantly false statement. But what truly happened? We have a boy who kind of slipped through the cracks of the system, and some of the proper channels that are supposed to be watching this were not there, and that definitely does include the parents. The entire system kind of let Garnell Moore down, and that's one of the things that a lot of people are just kind of very keen to note immediately. And someone from the Charlie Project who was writing about this on one of the Charlie Project blogs was even saying that they just had a soft spot for Garnell Moore because the world had just kind of turned a blind eye toward him. But what's going on with this particular case? What I sort of first wanted to say was, when you're dealing with a missing persons case of someone who just absolutely vanished off the face of the earth, there's a very high likelihood that that person has passed away, ended up dead, met with some foul play, and that somebody tried to cover it up. I mean, on this channel, we recently talked about the case of Casey Anthony and Kaylee Anthony, and Kaylee Anthony was someone who was found. They found her remains, and they found out after the disappearance, and just no one can account for her whereabouts for 31 days. It's like she vanished off the face of the earth, right? Well, she was found dead, buried. We also have one of the largest theories in the case of Tara Calico, like the Polaroid girl. They think that she'd been missing for 30 years and that she probably died the day that she went missing. I mean, if the most famous theory is correct, I mean, we see this stuff all the time. Even one of the biggest things in with the Madeleine McCann case about why Madeleine McCann was never found is that she died the night that she disappeared. And I actually kind of subscribe to that one. Not 100%, but that is one of the closest theories that I'm kind of supporting. So when you have cases of somebody saying that they just any of these mysteries where they use the term vanished, off the face of the earth, there's a very high chance that someone has passed away and that Garnell Moore could be deceased right now. I don't know that 100%. I mean, like, this case has not been solved yet. But one of the things that I do want to examine with this is that Garnell's aunt Belinda Cash took a lie detector test, but not like the conventional kind where it checks your heart rate and blood pressure and galvanic skin tension, and definitely not the computerized polygraph. No, she did the voice stress analysis. And it's my understanding that voice stress analysis are much, much less accurate than the computerized polygraphs. Like, we did a whole upload on this channel once talking about lie detectors, and it wasn't very popular, but what I would say about it is it kind of threw a giant wrench in what I was thinking that Garnell had been deceased. Like, I was trying to kind of compose a sort of narrative where Garnell probably encountered some sort of terrible accident and his aunt Belinda Cash covered up the scene, or maybe it was even something as the result of her. Like, I mean, I would hate to say that she murdered her family member, but that's why I kind of, if you have to talk about gut instincts, it's like there was a horrible accident, and then she covered up the scene and then made up the story about leaving Garnell on the steps of the social services building. Because if she had genuinely done that, it's like the address she provided was incorrect. I mean, was she even there in the first place? Well, that was the kind of thing that I was thinking about. The thing that I was going at, like the sort of theory that I had really been dealing with for a little while. And I've mostly just been thinking about this case. I haven't been able to go through all of the new things that people have been saying about Garnell Moore yet, but that was sort of like a theory that I had just sort of thought about, like if you kind of put your brain on repeat. But Cash passed her voice stress. Again, it's not 100% accurate, but she passed the thing. So it's like they asked her lots of questions about what was going on with Garnell, and she passed it. I once read that voice stress analysis are sometimes as little as 70% accurate. And that sounds like a big number, right? But 70%, I mean, that means, like 7 questions out of 10, yeah, okay, those would be accurate. And then 3 questions out of 10 would be completely inaccurate. It would only be accurate 70% of the time. I mean, 30% of what they're going to be asking people would come up wrong. I mean, like, if that is true, I mean, like, when you read stuff on the internet, I mean, how do you always know which sort of so called expert do you believe in? I'm certainly not a polygraph examiner, but it's like, so there's a high chance that there could be something inaccurate about Belinda Cash's voice stress analysis lie detector test that she took. It's just so bizarre about the things that she's saying. The trip to King's Dominion, when we know that Garnell Moore wasn't enrolled in school, that is one of the biggest things around this case. Because if he had been enrolled in school, there would be some more documentation and people would have noticed things a little bit sooner, and maybe someone could have responded in some way, whether you're talking about teachers or just the entire concept of the system. And I keep saying those terms, the system, but it's like, it's a series of people, like the kind of network that's supposed to be watching this stuff. But the fact of the matter is, Belinda Cash did pass that test. So does that mean that she is telling the truth about leaving Garnell Moore on the steps of the social services building? Well, one of the things that I've also thought is, I mean, she insists that she left him at 500 Hilton Street. What if she's just mistaken? I mean, what if she just got it wrong? I mean, do you know the address for your social services building off the top of your head? I certainly don't. The nearest one near to me. I mean, maybe it's on Hilton Street. Maybe it's on Houston Street. I mean, it's like we're human beings. We make a lot of mistakes. So I always notice that they kind of really want to zone in on that particular detail. In the case of Garnell Moore, that his Aunt Belinda Cash provided a fictitious address when she said she left him on the steps of the social services building. She could have just made a mistake. And that would mean another thing. I mean, that would be just as simple as that. She left him on the steps of a building, but she left him in a place and made a mistake. Not that that's a responsible thing to do. I mean, I hope anyone doesn't think that I condone that behavior. You decide that you can't care for your family member anymore, so it's like, okay, well, yeah, you go sit right there, and then you just kind of get as far away as you can. I certainly don't condone that type of behavior. It also sounds a little bit bizarre. I mean, that the things that Belinda Cash is saying kind of really do suggest that Garnell did encounter some unfortunate accident. And on one of the kind of blog posts, just a very small blog that I was reading prior to this recording, somebody was saying something such as they also believe that Garnell passed away, that he was no longer alive. But when I first heard of this case, and the few things that I could read online years ago were really just talking about something quite to the contrary. A lot of people were saying that they did not think that Garnell Moore passed away. They thought that he was just adopted by another family in West Baltimore, and he was kind of just, he lived with that family for a while, and maybe, he adopted a new identity or something like that. I can say that my gut instincts don't push me down that particular path. I don't really have that overwhelming feeling that that is the exact theory that I would support. I really feel that the things that Belinda Cash is talking about are probably kind of somewhat skewed for a reason, that perhaps Garnell did pass away and then she somehow covered up the scene. But why did she pass the lie detector voice stress analysis? Is it because those things are horribly inaccurate? Or is it because, like, I hate to bring this stuff up again, but when you're watching stuff on YouTube and, like, we mentioned Dr. Romani Darvusala, I hope I'm pronouncing her name correctly, on this channel before, and she was, the psychologist who talks about psychopaths, sociopaths, and narcissism, and she says that psychopaths and sociopaths can pass lie detector tests, like, because of their just, like, they don't reveal the physiological tracings of what people are detecting in a lie detector test. I don't know if that's established science, and I don't know if Belinda Cash is a psychopath. I Most likely not, based on the fact that there really are very few other descriptions of her doing things that would be psychopathic or sociopathic, with the exception of just leaving her nephew on the steps of a social services building saying, "Hey, see ya, just kidding, no, I won't, see ya." And it's like, but the reason I brought that stuff up is some people, according to this one psychologist on YouTube, can pass lie detector tests even if they are not telling the truth because of their neurochemistry, because of their brain functioning. That could be one thing. And excuse me for diverting and going off on that long rambling thing, but I mean, the police checked her out and she passed. So that's why they kind of think that why they believe that Belinda Cash didn't murder Garnell, that she didn't know someone who murdered Garnell. But it doesn't have to be something such as murder. I've been saying from the beginning that, like, I would imagine some sort of accident could have happened that could have caused Garnell's death, and then she could have covered up the scene, and that's why she had the bizarre stories. And um, I believe all the family members also were reaching out to her, and then she slowly just faded off the grid. And even in the article from the Baltimore Sun, the one that I mentioned, they say that Belinda Cash divorced and then remarried, so she's using a different last name that apparently the family members don't even know. But that also seems like the fact that she has so much distance between the family and her. That also seems like she's trying to get away from something. So it's very possible that Garnell did kind of meet an unfortunate demise, and that's absolutely terrible. I mean, even just saying it right now, it's just like, poor kid. No matter what the outcome is, poor kid. I mean, you had parents that weren't able to live up to their responsibilities, and then the system also was unable to kind of have that sort of safety net in place. But what I would sort of want to kind of discuss with the possibility of Garnell still being alive, well, if you're just going to entertain the theory that someone picked him up from the steps of whatever building he was left at, if what Belinda Cash says were true, and another family did pick him up and just take him home, where did he end up? This is perhaps not the most famous case, but I mean, like, if this case were, it's received a certain amount of publicity. I mean, wouldn't, like, is it possible that Garnell Moore is just living under a different name right now, and that people just aren't aware of who he is, and that he's never seen anything from the Charlie Project, or he never saw his face on countdown websites, or does he have any connection to that previous life? I'd say that it is the smallest bit possible. And I have to reiterate, the smallest bit possible that someone just picked him up, adopted him into a new family, and that he's just been living under a different name for like the last 15 years, almost 15 years. And once again, we don't even really know Garnell Moore disappeared, because this is going off the kind of testimony of Belinda Cash, who's been making conflicting statements to the family members, kind of giving the police a lot of reasons to doubt her credibility. However, she did pass the voice stress analysis, with the exception of one question. But in the Baltimore Sun, they were talking about how they think that it was something that was unrelated to legal issues, but that could very well highlight something about how these voice stress analyses, excuse me, are not really that accurate. But this was back, 15 years ago almost, so you're dealing with a lot of new stuff has come out with kind of polygraphs, lie detection, since over the last 10, 15 years. There have been a lot of advancements in that particular field. Well, what do you think happened to Garnell Moore? Do you think it's something that we've talked about, that he met an unfortunate demise and his aunt covered up the situation? In short, like, Garnell passed away because of a sort of accident, and that they tried to cover up the situation by fabricating the story about the social services building? Or do you believe that Garnell was adopted by another family and just kind of has been living with other people for the last 13, 14, 15 years? If you have anything to say at all about this case, I would love to hear, but most importantly, comments. Well, that's all for me now, and thank you, and until next time.